All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Chia, co-founder of Jammergig and the host of today's webinar, The Future of Casting, Trends, Challenges, and Opportunities. I'd like to welcome everyone here and thank everyone for being here together today. It kind of looks like we've got people from all over the world here. So while we're waiting for everyone to join, I'd like to ask everyone joining us today to let us know from what city and country you're joining us from. Just type in where you are using the Q&A menu at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I'd really love to see where everyone's coming from. All right, Orlando, that's where a lot of our panelists are from. Boston, welcome. People from New York, Montreal, that's where I am right now. Hong Kong, you're a long way from home. It's probably early in the morning there. Paris, from Atlanta. I have family in Atlanta, actually. Brussels, welcome. Las Vegas. Sarah used to live in Las Vegas. We've got some friends from Toronto, Louisiana, Ohio. We're really from all over. Manchester in the UK, welcome. Berlin, Miami and Tampa, New Jersey. All right, this is great. All right, I think it's time to introduce our panelists. We have with us today, we're proud and very happy to be able to present to you Kelly Goff, who is the manager of talent casting, booking, and contracts at Disney Live Entertainment. We have Stephanie Jansen, our senior manager of theatrical production at Celebrity Cruises. Sarah Davison, director of casting and performance at Feld Entertainment, and Rebecca Haw, founder of CODA, the world's first talent and recruitment agency for ballet. They're all seasoned veterans in the performing arts industry with varied backgrounds, so I'm really looking forward to an interesting discussion. With us as well is the CEO of Jammergig, Andrew Bustle, who will be acting as moderator for today's event. All right, so let's start talking about what it takes to be a casting director today. And I'd like to start with Kelly. And Kelly, what defines a proficient casting director in the current industry today? What is it that makes a casting director effective?
It's interesting. Thank you so much for having us and for giving me the first question, Rick. It's interesting. We just talked about this as a group, actually. We were doing a cast conservatory with some of our cast members, and we talked a lot about what we think makes a successful casting director. And I think the consensus is obviously, the performing background and understanding the talent that you're evaluating, but more importantly, we talked a lot about the human aspect and those soft skills that we think are so important in today's environment for our performers, that the casting director makes a safe space for that actor to come into the room and to do their best work. And so do you have the heart of a teacher? Are you somebody that wants to see others succeed? Do you really have the ability to not only give those adjustments and direction in the room, but also to get the best out of the performer in a way that they feel comfortable and that they are feeling supported in that space? And you have to be a people person, right? Beyond just being a people person, you really have to like people. That's what we do. That's our investment is into performers and wanting to help them succeed and navigate their career and finding the best talent for our creative partners and making sure that we're out in the industry, making an impact not only for our performers, but also just trying to talent share with each other as much as we can, networking with other casting directors and agents. So I think it's really, there's obviously the skill of it, but there is just so much of it that goes into those soft skills that I think are critical to be successful in this industry.
Yeah, that's interesting, the soft skill point, because I think that's a point that from an artist perspective, we probably don't see that. that part of it as much. I was going to ask Stephanie about the skills and abilities necessary, but I think you've already answered that. But I do have a question about, we're talking about how you have to be a people person. You have to, you're pretty much kind of the first wall that the artist sees when trying to get into a company. But that at the same time, the casting directors are kind of on the back end. Like we're not the upfront and center. We're kind of on the back end. And how does that play into the I guess feeling that feeling that maybe you're undervalued. And I'll throw this out to everyone, undervalued in your job, because I know that a lot of artists from their end, they don't necessarily see all the work that goes on the back end, and feel free anyone to jump in to answer that.
I'm happy to jump in. I think it's not necessarily that we're undervalued. I think the role of the casting director is very misunderstood. It is not a role that has a straight path to it. It's not, there's no school for it. There is no diploma for it, you know, and it really takes the right kind of people. It's a calling. And I think for that, and because we don't advertise it and there's no clear map, it's very misunderstood. And that's the difference that I would make, because I don't know that we're necessarily undervalued. But I will say from the performance perspective, we're not always remembered. We are the ambassadors of the brand or the project that they are wanting to come, and therefore we have to be these good human people that make them want to join, right? But there's usually going to be a 10% of that performer crowd that will remember the casting director versus the show director that they're going to go and work with for like 15 years. I would say we need to stop being secret agents. We need to start being a little bit more out there, and have more honesty and being more clear about what we expect and who we are and what we do. And the more we give that information, then the better understood we can be.
All right.
If I may jump in there as well, I completely agree with Sarah. Be out there. This job as a casting director is not a small job. It is a very big job. And yes, we need interpersonal skills. I love that Kelly mentioned that first, that you have to be a people person, not just talk to talent, but also to colleges and to directors and to agents. And there's so many people, network ability, there's so many people you have to talk to. But at the same time, you also have to be a business person. You negotiate contracts, salary requirements, understand where the industry is, understand where the trend is going, what the standards are, what you can get for this salary. And it is a business job as well, and a big one. And it requires a lot of networking, requires a lot of speaking, a lot of tough decisions, and it's not a small job. So we have to make this known as casting directors, and the companies have to value casting directors as well. It's the heart of a production. Without casting, the show is not going up, and will not continue. I think it's also the heart of the operation of a continuous production, not just a new show production. But without the casting directors, there is no show. So we need to stay big and make that known.
If I can briefly continue from that, there's been some really interesting perspectives, and actually something you've just said there, Stephanie, in the side of personally in the space that I'm in within creative arts and things like that, I have felt that the casting director role, the recruiter's role is undervalued, especially as it speaks to, how much attention the market has given that kind of role, and the realization of what that role can actually do for an establishment or a company, or, even just, the teams within those. And so in those areas, I have felt that the role is undervalued. And interestingly, from the talent side, I felt the opposite. So, you know, it's almost there's so much gratitude that there's suddenly someone here to be the middleman, to kind of fight your corner where it's necessary, communicate appropriately, the company's, desires, wishes, requirements, those kinds of things, and equally make it a really good experience for them from the talent, the dancer side. And so I've actually, felt that both sides, some undervaluing and some, an awful lot of gratitude in addition.
These are all really great answers, and I'd like to jump to back to Sarah, if I may. Now, how has the approach to discovering and recruiting new talent changed for casting directors in say the last 5 to 10 years? And to clarify that, what kinds of changes have you seen in the market with respect to three things: quality, the size of the talent pool, and the actual casting approach chosen compared to, say, 10 years ago?
So thank you for this question. I think as the casting approach, the biggest thing I would say is more mindfulness for being culturally appropriate and in diversity. We have a lot of work to do in this topic, but I think that I have seen much more attention and education through this. So that would be the biggest thing. I think 10 years ago, auditioning was live, and the bigger the room, the better the audition was. And we have seen in the last decade technology coming up, virtual. COVID has forced us to not be in the room with people. So we have seen a shift from literally going from we have to have 300 people in the room to we don't need to see anybody live. So that's been really interesting in the sense that we talk about that human aspect and, are we losing some of that human aspect when we are no longer in the room having this personal exchange with our candidates? For me, the most important thing is going to be that time with the candidate. So even if it is virtual, I would say that the attention to still making it somewhat live is also something that we try to continue doing. So finding that balance between the can go. Also, traveling has become completely expensive. I don't know that every company wants to keep flying everybody right and left. So the virtual has become a big part. As far as the talent, I would say I have seen a shift that they don't necessarily want long-term work anymore. They want the short term. They want as many experiences. There's a bit of FOMO there of where if I'm 2 years in a contract here, then maybe I'll miss out on the next best thing. And I would also say a more focus on tricks and wow factor. I think all the TikTok, Instagram, has taught us that it's the short moment. We may not see as much attention to, the deep training. And I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying it's not as much the trend. So the tricks and the wow and the short-term kind of gratification is what I have seen.
All right. And on that same vein, I'd like to ask Kelly, do you notice any notable gaps in specific skill sets or abilities with respect to what the talent pool possesses versus what the projects need?
I think we all felt a bit of a shift because there was a stall in in education and training for the last couple of years, but I think the talent is catching up. When we go out and do workshops and work with the talent in universities or colleges, I think we are seeing the progression of the catch-up process happening. So that's great. I do think there was a little bit of a gap there. But I think one of the other things that we've talked about recently and some of the feedback that we've gotten from our creative teams is that there seems to be maybe a gap in retention for our performers that they're noticing. And I think we could all contribute that a little bit to the society that we're in right now. Sarah just mentioned it's that quick, the tricks and the wows and the quick gratification. And I think some of that is also contributing to retention for our performers. They're used to those 15, 30 second, 45-second moments. And so teaching a large show with a lot to retain seems to be a little bit of a gap. We're not seeing that across the board, but that might be something that we're going to have to start thinking about. And how do we approach that as a creative team? Do we teach differently? Do we run our rehearsals differently? What does that look like? So that's some of the work we're going to be doing over the next year.
Okay. And I'd like to ask Stephanie on that same vein, because I'm sure you're going to have to deal with some of the same things. Like she mentioned the retention gap, but in the wake of COVID-19, you would think that people would be gravitating towards more longer term stable jobs. Why do you think that the opposite would be happening?
I do think right now it is with the performer. The performers have a lot of options. The industry opened up all at once. And amongst all of us and our production companies, we are struggling with competition, which is great for the performer. I find we have a lot of competitions, which gives the performer, and it's good for them, and I actually applaud that, the opportunity to say, hey, I would like to do a 3-month contract. I don't do 6 months anymore. I would like to grow and grow. The urge to grow, and maybe that is because of the gap and the pause in 2020, 2021 is definitely there, and the future is bright for the performers and a lot of opportunities. At the same time, I agree with my colleagues' skill set, and just the tricks are getting bigger. It is because of social media, probably. Those get the biggest hits, and proper technique makes the performer, and I still believe in that. And it might be conservative, but a proper technique teaches the attention span as well. So if you're well trained and go through your college degrees and really evolve your skill set, then it does train your brain as well, and you will be able to concentrate more on the demands of the show.
And so does this mean that are we seeing with these people who are in this social media kind of flashbang boom sort of time we live in today, are we seeing that when we get them into a long-term contract, that they have difficulty adapting to the we're working 10 hours a day, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. We have to actually be on for 2 hours in a show. Are we seeing challenges with respect to that? And I'll throw this out to anyone who wants to answer.
Particularly in ballet, we have seen that. And I think an area that I also feel it came from was the kind of shutdown that COVID brought and the pandemic. And therefore the freedom to have other areas of your own life. The arts are so consuming. And so if that's, all you've been used to, and suddenly you get a taste for a broader life, I think that's also kind of thrown a spanner into the works. But with an online attention span of 3 seconds, you have 3 seconds on any given platform to catch someone's attention with any medium that you're using. Therefore, the consumers have a 3-second attention span, but and before becoming interested. And I think not just the longevity to stay in a contract, but also I think there is an issue with the respect and patience within the arts to, do the 10-hour days, do the double performance days. And so not just the contract length, but also within that contract, and how much they're really willing to put into that on the daily, on the weekly, as a whole, in addition to, the longer contract lengths. Particularly, we're seeing that in classical companies. It's almost too easy to take a sick day now.
And yet we're seeing a lot of companies today that are actually casting based on follower numbers. And they're looking for often they're looking for influencers to cast. And my question next question I'd like to throw out to everyone is this influencer strategy actually turning out to be effective? That's my first question. And my second follow-up question is it ethical?
I could go on, Stephanie. Go on.
Well, I I think it is effective because you're getting your name out there and you are being seen, especially being an influencer. I'll look on Instagram and then happen to see the reel of the hand balancer in Berlin. Effective, yes, if you can back it up with proper skill set and not just one trick or two tricks. But effective to first maybe open the door slightly and be known and get to know casting directors. But then if you don't have, as a performer, if a performer doesn't have anything to back it up, the technique is not there, the experience is not there, then I do think it can backfire.
I agree. I think it can, sorry. I think it can go both ways. And what we're finding, particularly even within big companies now, but also within galas, guesting opportunities, is that the follower count is looked to as a way of higher ticket sales. Post-pandemic, ticket sales are, becoming more and more difficult to, reach certain targets, and also cost of living now, whereby most people would be attending much more frequently. It's not always a possibility, and so I think establishments and companies are going towards a following to kind of entice those audiences, for those individuals, for the personal brands that those individuals have created on a myriad of platforms. But I couldn't agree more that you very quickly can tell if it's not backed up with legitimate background, technique, experience, and all these other things, great artistry. And that doesn't do the talent or the dancer any good in the long run. But audiences are very quick to judge those things as well, and so can also be quite damaging if not handled carefully with that kind of attention.
And how do you and once again, I'll throw this out to everyone. How do you feel about and I know that they're two different things. You have to find someone to fit a profile, and then there are other profiles where you have to actually look for someone who is exceptional in what they do. Now, when you see something like this, where someone's being hired basically because they have 1 million followers, on the back end, being the person filtering the first line of defense for this casting, how do you feel about this?
I can jump in. It's a marketing strategy, both for the audience and for the demographic that we're targeting as performers. Because if we bring this person that is well known and this artist that has 100,000 followers, then most likely out of these 100,000 followers, there's an entire community of people that we actually want to hire. And that place the name of our company, of the brand, in front of, and I'm talking especially when we start casting for a new skill or, something that is not directly related to what the brand has used to be. And that's all it is. It's a marketing strategy. It depends on the individual. I have seen great success for some people that were extreme influencers that still are extreme influencers and that have gone, 10 years performing 400 shows at Cirque du Soleil and doing great. I've also seen them burn, in the sense that they just can't sustain the load. But if it's for a short project, why not? You know, we know what we're getting.
Okay. I'd like to throw a question out to the audience, actually. What we'll do is we'll collect those answers and organize and summarize the results and send them all to you later after the webinar is over. But for our audience, and I know that we have a lot of casting professionals and agents online today. My question to you is, what is the greatest challenge that you face around the general casting process today, and how would you suggest that we solve that or those challenges? Once again, just answer in the Q&A, and we will collect all that information and distribute it to you later. My next question I'd like to direct towards Kelly now. Agents and casting directors often end up working crazy hours. I mean, we're almost 24/7, right? And someone in the industry said to me on Twitter once, an agent, or you know, so we were discussing the time it takes to go through numerous candidates, you know, and the agent responded to me, well, that's the job. But is it really, you know, or have we begun to wear the I'm such a busy person as kind of a badge of honor?
Wow, that's a good question, Rick. You know, I think it's important to balance it. You know, we do online submissions. I know that Sarah was just mentioning the difference between, you know, I think several years ago where we did almost everything in person, and now we're shifting to online submissions, and that gives us the ability to make sure that that time that we spend in person is narrowed down and that we are really making the most of that time. Now, to shift the other way, to get there, what do we have to do? We're going to have to go through all the online submissions. So there is there's a win to this process where we know we're going to maximize our time in the room. We're going to only do callbacks. We may not have to have a huge open call with 700 people attending, but now we have to spend the time going through online submissions. I think, you know, I think the output is better. I think the experience for the performers is better. You know, you're not going to fly from, you know, one area of the country to another for an open call, but you will more than likely fly there if you're being invited to a callback and we're down to a small number of people. So we're trying to respect their time and ours. So I think there's a lot of things that we've done that are more efficient, but then on the back end to get there, sometimes we are adding the workload of going through the online submissions and really seeing all of the candidates. You know, it's hard because just like you said, the comment is, well, it's part of the job. Well, it is part of the job, but I think it's how we invest that time. So I think when we look at it, if you looked at the number of hours we're spending going through online submissions, it is less than if we sat and went through 700 people in person, and certainly that's a better experience for everybody. So I think you're always going to have to manage the workload in a way that feels like it is manageable. I also think it's, you know, we have to partner with each other. And I know that everybody's businesses are not structured the same. But certainly here with all of our casting directors, we rely heavily on partnerships and dividing that workload and leaning on each other for support and raising your hand when things are overwhelming, because we all know that when you're overworked and you're overwhelmed, your output is not going to be as good. So it's really just leaning into the partnerships for us and trying to work smarter and more efficiently. But I think with casting, you're going to have times where you're super, super busy, and then there's a little break, and then you're super, super busy and there's a little break. So I think that's with any industry, but that's how we're managing it here.
And I think you hit on some really important points there. I think also we often forget that there's a cost issue as well, especially with respect to the talent who often have to travel, and not to mention the time. Now, the follow-up question to that is that can we use technology to help us? Because there are tools out there that we can use, and there are you know, and I notice sometimes that there's a resistance, and I'd like to ask Rebecca, being someone who has started this agency and has for many reasons, and I'm sure she can explain to us those reasons. She's gone to the use of technology to help her with that. Do you believe that there is a bit of resistance to adopting new time and work-saving technology in this industry in general?
Absolutely. And I find this in many ways. I feel like almost all creativity is taken up in other areas, kind of choreographically, artistically, and suddenly creative minds then can't possibly fathom that there is there are other ways that, a time-old process can be done and improved. For context, as Rick touched on there, I struggled inordinately auditioning as a dancer, and on the cost side, I took out a £10,000 loan as a student to pay for my auditions, and it didn't last very long. And so I certainly appreciate where digital has encouraged a bit more filtration, and where some tools can come in handy there. Even the time and overwhelm of sifting through online submissions, there are super easy implementable ways to even improve that process. And so whether that's filtering out certain requirements of the role or job, almost as automated knockout things. And it sounds super harsh for a dancer or a talent to almost feel like a robot has dismissed them. And so we need to be careful and sensitive there, but it does come up as a better result for the talent, in the sense of, if they weren't right for the role anyway, they're not spending their time and finances heading to an audition of a role that they weren't right for, or for a myriad of reasons wouldn't have been able to get there. And on the cost side, of course there is a cost to new technologies or implementing new processes and operations, whether that's training, implementation. There is always a cost, though. It might not always be a financial cost. There are financial costs involved in implementing some of these things, but the cost you're saving is the time, the overwhelm, the burnout, all the other things that the people who end up, involved in these things are not actually handling. And so there is always a cost, and I've felt inordinate resistance from the industry in some areas, and some, they go straight to talking about the costs. The cost is the time, the cost is the overwhelm, the burnout, and all of these things. And so there is a huge resistance there. And I think if we could tap into those creative minds from other areas and utilize them in these spaces, that would do the industry very well, and kind of nurture that resistance into a better direction, a more efficient direction.
And so following up with that, okay, so I think it's clear that you found that technology has helped you greatly in what you have to do. I know it's helped me greatly. But now, from where are we going with technology in this casting process? Like from here on out, what do we need in our profession? And when I say our profession, I'm talking about the casting directors, I'm talking about agents, I'm talking about production companies, everyone involved in the casting process and who has to deal with the results of the casting. What do we need from technology in order to address some of these challenges that everyone face today? And the follow-up question to that is, why do we feel threatened by a greater use of technology in what we do? And I'll throw that out to anyone who wants to jump in.
I think some of the resistance that we've gotten from our creative teams is there's a fear of, you're showing me this amazing performer from an online submission or a video that you've taken. I'm not having that moment of personal connection to that performer. And so I think there's been some, I don't know about everybody else, but there has been some resistance from that perspective. I think they're leaning into that a little bit more as we move. Certainly for new product, that would be different, but from a sustainment perspective of talent that we're bringing in for existing, I think we are getting there with, but then it puts more pressure on the casting director, I think, to really fill in those gaps, right? I worked with Rick. He was amazing. He picked up quickly. You know, we gave him adjustments. He made, you know, so they're not there to experience that all the time now. So I think there is a little bit of trust in putting performers forward for our creative team, and them just trusting that they didn't necessarily have that personal connection with the performer, but trusting not only the casting director, but what they're seeing in front of us. Yeah, I think they kind of come up with all kinds of things. Well, they could have videotaped that 80 times, and that's the best take. You know, how do we know that? You know, it's the fear of the fear of what we don't know about somebody. I think that's certainly just from a creative lens when it comes to technology.
And on that same note, because I have been in a lot of auditions where live, in person, face to face, where we spend 2 full days with candidates and recommended based on that, and where I've been actually wrong, in the sense that I have worked with someone for 2 days, found that they follow directions, that they're very gung-ho, very pleasant to work with, and then we get them on the show and they end up being hellacious to work with. And the exact opposite as well. I remember someone specifically who we had a question of whether or not he was going to be a team player. We took a chance on him, and he ended up being everyone's favorite person. So both on in a work sense and a personal sense. So seeing is that we can still be wrong live. Are we making more mistakes doing the online casting than the live casting, or is it about the same?
I'm just wondering, why does it have to be either or? Kelly just mentioned in one of the other questions how much organization talent a casting director have to have, and in order to manage the time, manage busy work, maybe not going to those big open calls, but then going to the callback sessions. So can't technology help us with the busy work? Because a casting director obviously has to be an interpersonal a human as well, and talk to performers, talk to a lot of people. So burned out casting director is not going to serve anyone that is too busy. So organizational talent is key, and technology would help the organization of the whole casting process. I do believe that seeing the performer in person is important, especially we are not just casting skill set, we also cast the human behind it. And in show creation, I just finished a 173-day creation process, and this cast was so wonderful. Not just skill set, but if they hadn't been these wonderful human beings that worked with us and developed a creative environment, not just us, but the environment comes from the performer as well. It's a give and take. So I think it's very important to cast a human and a wonderful person that is open and fun. And we can have a laugh at 1 o'clock in the morning during tech rehearsals or something. And I don't think technology can take that process. Skill set, maybe the busy work for sure. Organization, help us with database and all of that, organizing, streamlining. But then the person, I think it's important to see and to talk to people.
Right. And so next question is for Sarah. So if we take everything that's what's been said so far about the online process versus the advantages and disadvantages of online versus live versus mixed, what does the future of casting look like? Are there trends today that you anticipate changing over the next 5 years?
Do you want to know what I would like to see, or do you want to know what I anticipate happening?
I would like to, I
It's
would
like
like to, I would like to hear both, actually.
Um, so something I'd like to see, because we have gone from seeing everybody to seeing practically nobody, I'd like to see, as Stephanie said, more of a balance of this. And I think that this is where technology can help us. I mean, the business model, the company I'm currently working with, is strictly touring. And there is no way that we would be able to run our business without systems, without automation, and without the ability to do virtual anything. So technology actually, where I am, is very much welcome and is needed. So it's really interesting to hear everybody's perspective that, you know, there's more more stop in your areas, because where I stand, it's a priority, so that we can spend the time with the candidates, so that we have the time to do these one-on-ones once we're down 2 or 3 candidates, so that the contracts will have themselves set up, so that you know, the systems themselves, the sorting the candidates, matching the skills and the roles, all of that can be in the database. But the one-on-one human element is something that technology won't be able to take. So that's how I would like it to continue evolving. I would like for us to have systems that can take us through the entire cycle of the performer, so that we can have the time to be the human connectors that we're striving to be. As far as how I think it's going, I think we're gonna eventually get there, but it's not gonna go as quick as I'd like. And I think it's also heavily going to depend on, you know, company directions, budgets, and priorities. And it's just is the reality.
And this is my next question is actually, it's sort of related, but also sort of on another plane. From the perspective of the casting director and possibly from the agents as well, how do you balance serving the production and committing also to things like transparency, equity, diversity, accessibility, those kinds of concepts? Like, how do you balance being the gatekeeper, or like the first line of defense, so to speak, and yet providing what the production wants? And this is thrown out to everybody.
I can kick it off. What's interesting, and I found with implementing technology into the kind of recruitment area, especially in ballet, is we're able to cover a lot more of those topics and areas where we weren't doing before. You know, originally, still, I say originally like it doesn't happen anymore. 98% of the time, you know, when someone applies to a classical company, they'll send a video or 3, couple of photos and a CV. You don't get anything else. And so actually what I'm finding with technology and, you know, utilizing ATS's systems, I'm personally using JammerGig, using those kinds of things and really tailoring those application forms, you get way more information from a candidate than you would with, you know, and it would go for the in-person super open calls where you just rock up with your CV and pop it on the desk. And so actually I'm finding that we have far more information there. And I think what I've also found, you know, grossly helpful is we spend a lot of time studying, you know, the kind of seminars that these directors of these companies were having and seeing what their pain points were from the inside there, and how we can kind of communicate that through to the talent that is socially responsible and is in line with, you know, today's values. You know, CODA, we've partnered with a diversity and inclusion consultant, Hilary Sakonas, who actually Rick and Andrew both knew who that is, and she's helped us inordinately in not only educating us on how we kind of navigate that space, but also then, you know, is at the disposal of our clients and the companies to educate them further in those areas, so that it's not, you know, we're not completely blocking and filtering what's coming through from each side, but educating both sides and also presenting it in, you know, a respectful and dignified way.
I think for
And-
us, we
sorry.
also have made it our one of our goals to present to our creative team inclusion in a way that maybe they have not thought of for a role that they've seen in one direction for a very long time. So I think it's our responsibility as casting directors to continue to push and bring new talent into that space, to say, we understand that we've cast this role this way for X period of time, but we'd like to look at it differently. Here's some talent that we think is going to be great in this role, but it's definitely different from a creative lens. And let's take a look at it together and see how we feel about it. And I think that it's our responsibility to continue to push that, whether it's, you know, ethnicity, gender, body inclusivity, whatever it is, that we continue to make sure that we're putting performers in front of our partners so that they can look at it differently.
And so, you know, if I were to aim this at Sarah and Stephanie, you know, how much leeway do you have to suggest things that are a little bit outside of what was asked for?
If Sarah, you can start. If talking about technology, my computer just completely shut down, so I just cut off and had to dial back in. But Sarah, if you can start, so I could catch up what you were just talking about.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because with Feld, we actually represent IPs that are from, you know, partner companies. So it really depends on the partner company's requirements, and we really do our best and work hard to continue that partnership and to continue representing the IP that we present to the standard of our partners. So it really depends on the IP. And there are some where there is very little leeway, and we absolutely understand why, and that makes the casting extremely difficult but so gratifying. And we see the response from the audience perspective, you know, that they feel seen and they feel represented. And then some other IPs, we will absolutely be able to present wild cards, and it's more going to be about the skill set. So yeah, I would say it really depends on the product, at least in my current role.
And going back to the question of transparency and diversity and all that stuff, focusing on the transparency part of it. So transparency with respect to yes, the clients that you're casting for, but what about to the artists? Now, I know that, you know, we have some big companies here today, and we're used to receiving submissions from so many people. And at some point, we tend to tell people, you know, the proverbial "don't call us, we'll call you." How do we, you know, normally when we have so many people, we just say we're going to contact the people who are retained. But in the meantime, everyone out there is thinking, well, you know, did I get it? You know, should I take this other job? Or, you know, is there a way of, you know, keeping that transparency even with the people who are not retained? Like, is that something that you think is important? Or should we just keep doing things the way we're doing? We'll contact the people who are hired or called back, and everyone else, they'll get the message.
I think it's extremely important to be transparent, because we're all humans. We need to know exactly where we stand. We help each other and pay it forward in entertainment industry. All of us are ex-performers, and a lot of casting directors are ex-performers, so treating performers and auditionees the way we wanted to be treated is important. It is hard sometimes to tell the bitter truth is always hard. It's easier to relay a message that is a positive message for everyone. But I think there needs to be training, talking points, a way to how do you speak to people to deliver a message that's not necessarily a positive one, but at the same time would help the person develop the skill set. So eventually they do get hired by a company that they are perfect for.
So we're at the moment where I think we need to do a Q&A. I'd like to open the floor to the audience for any questions that you may have for our panelists from our audience. While you're use the same Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom, and while you're doing that, I would like to tell everyone a little bit about who we are at Jammergig and why we exist. So Jammergig is a casting and talent management solution created by 4 founders from both the technology and casting industries. And we came together and set out on this journey to create software to make the whole casting and talent management process not only a whole lot easier and faster, but to also be more user-friendly and artist-friendly at the same time. Now, with Jammergig, you can still promote casting calls on all your favorite channels, but as you use multiple sources to source performers, incoming talent profiles can be captured in one single place, which would be your own branded portal. And what this means is that the information from every talent application becomes available within your own media-enhanced private roster. And this performer client information is what not only allows you to make each casting faster with time, but it's also what gives a business in this industry its principal value, as you all know already. And it also helps maintain richer relationships with the talent themselves. Now, we believe that casting does not have to be such a tedious and frustrating process. And this is why we created Jammergig, a solution for all professionals involved in that casting process by casting professionals to remove and reduce time spent on the tedious stuff and allow you to use that time on the things that you're an expert in and that I'm sure you would much prefer doing. So I encourage you to visit us at jammergig.com, or if you do contact us, one of us can even show it to you firsthand. It uses advanced technology and is really quite cool. All right, so let's come back, and I'm ready to dive into some questions here. All right, we have a question. What steps do you take to ensure diversity and representation in your casting choices? And how do you handle criticism regarding casting decisions? Who wants to answer that one?
I'm happy to answer that one. And I'm the first one that there's a lot of opportunity with diversity in our productions. Where we have most opportunities, not necessarily choosing the talent, but helping the talent walk through the door. And that is what we are currently working on strategy. How do we motivate diverse talent to walk through the door? Because there's an assumption and a stigma that what we want is a certain type of talent. This stigma is not true, but how do we stop that stigma, and how do we move forward so everybody knows and advertise to the world that we are working towards a diverse casting, so on our stage everybody is represented.
And my next question we've got is, do you think that AI will take the place of certain types of actors? And how are you addressing that? Have you experienced actors asking about licensing for their likeness? Who wants to answer that one? Kelly?
We have not. We're not in the AI space for any of our live performances. We're Disney Live Entertainment, so we are not venturing into AI at this point.
Does anyone have that experience?
Not specifically on licenses for a likeness, no. We're utilizing AI in CODA with regards to systems, processes, communication, ensuring that the operations are, up to snuff to a level that, perhaps one individual would not be able to deliver to so many people, not with regards to licensing of a likeness, not yet.
All right. Another question we have here is, you mentioned automation earlier, that it would help speed up the casting process to enable you to spend maximum time actually working on performances. What kind of functions could be made easier for you through automation?
I'll take that one. As I mentioned before, I'm currently actually working on a system where our contract will be much more automated, first of all, so no more word sheets and and all these things. Also, being able to sort talent with an organized database, and being able to do searches, being able to have specific fields, so that instead of going through each person until I find the right one, so I can really filter the talent that is looked for through whatever attributes that we're looking for. So these are the biggest things, and just things like keeping track of our steps, and knowing that this person was the last person on this file and they did this task, so I don't have to go and ask, and I can just pick up the next task. So yeah, things like this that will just, the few minutes that we grab each day will help us spend a few minutes more on a live audition or Zoom with who we actually are interested in.
Documentation, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we forget sometimes that saving 5 seconds here and there on a task that you do 100 times a day ends up accumulating quite a lot at the end of a week or at the end of a month. Our next question is, what authority does your company's casting director have? For example, can the casting director negotiate the terms of the contract? Can the casting director make decisions? If so, which ones? And these questions are for everybody.
Our casting directors do make casting decisions. We're certainly collaborating with our show director and our creative team as well. But it is they do have a very large voice in those decisions as well. And from a negotiating standpoint for our professional contracts, the casting director makes the initial interest and availability call and can offer up some information, but then we have a specific role here in our organization that does the official offer and then negotiates the rates, and that is not a casting director, but that is their specific job, is to negotiate those rates with the performers for their contracts.
And Sarah and Steffi, is that similar at Feld and at Celebrity?
Go ahead.
Sarah?
Actually, no. And for me, it's interesting because I have lived both realities. Here at Feld, the casting director will both take the casting decision in collaboration with the creative teams, but ultimately the casting director will make the decision. And we do also handle the full process of the contract up until the pre-onboarding, which is very different from previous reality in other companies, where it was much more structured in the sense that each person had one role. But we also handle training as well. So we're not just a casting department here.
It's the
Stephanie?
same, exactly the same with us. The casting director will make the decision and also negotiates contracts. Here it is quite a powerful position, except when it comes to new product and new show creation. Of course, we work with the directors, but even then, that's more collaborative environment, and yeah, they do make the decisions.
All right. So we have time for just one last question before we close off. How do you navigate referrals of candidates or resources to other casting colleagues between companies that can be viewed as competitors?
I'd be happy to start on this one. And it was something that I actually came across in YouTube University recently. And I'd heard someone say that crazy idea about how about we embrace our competition as, you know, kind of allies. You know, there's so much information that can be shared, you know, between individuals who are in similar fields. I mean, we're doing it now, and I'm sure no one feels as though anyone else is competition, but I started implementing that, you know, quite a while ago, and I found it completely fruitful, because not only are there conversations and experiences and scenarios that you get a different perspective on, you get new learnings on, and these kinds of things. It's also a nice symbiotic relationship to pass, you know, each other work. And so if that's, you know, we know that this talent is free at this time, do you have anything? No. Or I can't fill this contract, can you do it? And just kind of sharing the load in a sense. And I think it comes down to perspective. Would you rather have friends in the field or enemies? There's really no need for, you know, animosity towards you know, other competitors. There are very few of us in my space, I appreciate, but that's how I feel anyway.
No, I think, you know, talent sharing is beneficial for us, is beneficial for the performers, and ultimately our goal and our job is to get performers jobs and to fill the roles. So I think there's no downside to the talent sharing. And I know, I'm sure everybody on the screen has done it, you know, reached out to somebody to say, you know, Rick, you were talking about the guy earlier. We weren't sure, we were sitting on the fence whether he'd be a team player. How great is it, you know, if I can pick up the phone and call Sarah and say, I see on their resume they worked for you, you know, what was the experience like? And, you know, I think it's great to have those relationships where we can have transparency and open dialogue about performers. So I think it's a benefit.
Absolutely.
For me, it's essential. And at the end of the day, the performer will go work where they want to go work. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to make them take a gig that they don't want. And I think, yeah, we are colleagues, and we all share the same space. And I absolutely value my colleagues' expertise. And yeah, so for me, it's absolutely essential.
I totally agree. I completely agree with my colleagues as well. So I might send some performers up to Disney or to Feld after their contract with Celebrity Cruises.
Sounds
All
good
right.
to us.
I'm not sure if we have that many ballerinas, but but if we do, we'll let you know.
Well, we've
Keep
unfortunately we run out of time. But before I go, I'd like to thank our wonderful panel for having agreed to share their time and their experience and their thoughts with us. And I'd also like to thank all of you out in the audience who have come to hear what they have to say. And I hope that you've had an enjoyable and valuable time with us today. I know an hour is not very long. I think we could have continued talking for quite a while. We will be making the recording of today's webinar available to everyone who registered for the webinar as soon as we can. So if you have any colleagues or know of any other industry professionals who would be interested in watching today's event, you'll be able to invite them to watch that recording. I invite you all to write to us and let us know if you enjoyed today's discussion and if you have any specific thoughts that you'd like to share about it. I would also like to encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook and Instagram, and of course to visit our website, www.jammergig.com. Reach out to us at any time if you have questions about this webinar, or if you'd be interested in us doing another one on a particular topic that is important to you, or simply would like to know more about who we are and what we do. I'm Rick Chia from Jammergig, and I'd like to thank you again for joining us today and to wish everyone a very, very happy, safe holiday season. May the new year bring you nothing but the best that this industry has to offer. See you next time.